sport. But when we come back, we'll be staying with hurling. All the latest from Limerick and the ongoing. It began last October when Justin McCarthy decided that he didn't acquire a large number of last year's panel. And communication seems to be at the core of this particular battle on the banks of the Shannon. With the story and this insightful look, here's Marty Morrissey.
Storm clouds have been gathering over Limerick for a long time. It's hard to believe that it's 37 years since Limerick last won the All-Ireland Senior Hurling title. 5 All-Ireland final appearances since 1973 reflect poorly on a county that is perceived as a hurling stronghold in the GAA world. Enter Justin McCarthy in 2008. The Corkman is recognised as one of the country's finest coaches, having won an All-Ireland himself in 1966.
Justin McCarthy for Cork, putting Kilkennyman on the wrong foot and he sends it high.
Mentally and spiritually strong, Justin McCarthy is a hurling purist, and his constant practising in the ball alleys near his home is renowned. His appointment in Limerick was a little surprising, following his controversial departure in Waterford, although his record with the Daishies was most impressive. A hammering by Tipperary in last year's All-Ireland semi-final was the final spark that lit the decision to make change. 5 months ago, text messages were sent to 19 members of the 09 panel requesting their attendance at a meeting. Excluding Mark Foley, 9 players were never contacted. There was no communication. They were essentially dropped. There had been an inference from the management that there was indiscipline and a lack of commitment by some in the squad. Subsequently, 11 players withdrew, primarily in support of their former teammates who they felt were badly treated. Significantly, some players withdrew because they felt the training and coaching was simply not up to scratch.
My main reason for pulling out the panel is that the preparation and the standard of training wasn't up to what it should be, you know. A lot of lads were very, very hurt. So the older lads were very hurt the way their comrades, I suppose, for the last few years, the way they were treated. You know, in this day and age, like, you know, I don't think it's right to be treated like that, like, you know, especially when, like, playing for county you're volunteering to play for county, you know, it's by choice, and you make a lot of sacrifice and you put in a lot of work. And to be treated like that in the media, in the papers, I suppose this isn't right, like, you know.
Since last October, the Limerick hurling crisis has been in free fall. Over the last 5 months, there's been little or no communication between the warring factions. In the absence of dialogue, there's been rumour and innuendo, statements from players saying no to playing while McCarthy remains in charge. Croke Park equally saying no to getting involved, and substantial beatings in the National Hurling League. It all culminated in a truly amazing second vote of confidence in McCarthy continuing as Limerick manager. This happened last Tuesday night in the Clohan GAA clubhouse. But was this vote more an anti-player rather than a pro-McCarthy stance?
It's very hard to let players rule a county, and then if you have 5 clubs ruling a county, and I felt that all the time. You see that people would see through the thing and they'd vote as way as it happened.
You can't have the players running. Somebody has to run it, like, so the players can't run it, like. The decision is made now, so they have to stand behind who we have, and hopefully the players will come back.
It's an awful mess. I know 2 players from my club, and they want to hurl, and they can't.
It is the end of the road. Like there's no such thing as coming back here, putting down another vote of confidence in the team management, or there's no question of putting down a vote of no confidence in the top table. We are where we are, and that's the position that we find ourselves in.
Mark Foley has been an outstanding player for club and county. A leader, a captain, an all-star, a former Young Hurler of the Year. What's his view now of the crisis?
The crux of the problem is the players maybe see that they're being treated with a lack of respect. Now, Justin, in fairness, rang me initially, informed me he was making changes and bringing in a lot of new guys, and I said the best of luck to him, and I had absolutely no problem with that. But I know the rest of the players who were dropped weren't informed, and then there was an inference that there was a lack of discipline amongst the players that were dropped. So I suppose really those players are still very hurt. They're upset at the way that their whole case was handled. And I suppose at this stage, how do you resolve it? And maybe if Justin picks up the phone and say, look, to those players, I'm sorry, what happened, it was a mistake, it probably wasn't the way to handle things, and let's move forward. Liam Lenihan has apologised on behalf of the county board, but in my opinion, It's a manager's job to drop players. It's a manager's job to inform players that they're gone. And after that, I think no one has a problem.
And what do you think, Mark, will be the reaction tonight when Justin McCarthy and the Limerick management hear you? Do you think that they will respond positively?
I have no idea, Marty, at this stage, because there's been so little communication. There's been communication maybe between the younger players. I know a lot of them have been anti-selectors and county board members, but I don't know at this stage. I really don't know. I suppose at this stage the communication lines have not been open to any great effect, and at this stage I don't know, but I'd like to see a positive effect, maybe something like if Justin was watching tonight.
Despite numerous requests, the Limerick management rejected all invitations to participate in this report. However, Justin McCarthy did talk to the Limerick Leaders GA correspondent Jerome O'Connell.
When I spoke to Justin McCarthy, he was adamant that he was willing to start over with the players once more with a clean slate, as he said it, and pointed out that there would be no grudges held against the players, and anything that was said or anything that was done would be left in the past.
Ollie Moran is a former All-Star. He feels that the healing process should start with Justin McCarthy.
Certainly if he put his hand up and said, look, you know, there wasn't an issue as regards discipline or lack of commitment last year, that would certainly be a step in the right direction. Now again, I can't speak for any of the players that have either been dropped or the players that have left the panel, but I would imagine that certainly would be a starting point.
With anger still in the air over Limerick, the people's frustrations are palpable.
No, I think it's absolutely disastrous. Handled very badly altogether.
There's great sadness that this situation has festered so long, and there's a great desire for resolution.
It's all about the game. See, they're killing the game, because the more they fight on, goes on, the people we love the game, we suffer because of them.
What is wrong with Justin McCarthy? They won't come out in the open and say, you know, voice what's wrong.
Well, I think it's about time they all just sat around the table and got it sorted. You know, it's a disgrace at this stage, and it's been going on way too long.
To see this going on in a national stage, I think we are tired of it, to be honest. Yeah, very, very tired of it.
Over the last 10 years, there have been nothing but choppy waters here in Shannonside. Despite Limerick winning 3 under-21 All-Ireland titles in a row, they never really graduated to senior level. Over the last 7 years, there have been 5 different senior managers. So what is the problem? Is it the players? Is it the managers? Or is it the county board? Either way, it's a problem that needs to be tackled. So how would one of those former managers solve this particular dilemma?
I would bring the management of the hurling team, county board, certain officers of county board, and the players together. Maybe have an independent person in there chairing the meeting. And I would tell them to leave their egos outside the door, that Limerick hurling comes first. And I wouldn't let them out of the room until such time as they had problems sorted out. Now, there have been problems on all sides. There's nobody out here without blame. But let's get the blame out into the open, sort it out, and then come back and start playing for Limerick.
Marty Morrissey reporting there from Limerick. Donald O'Grady, it was said in the report there, 7 years, 5 managers, that's a fair attrition.
Well, it's a fair turnover, Michael, but I mean, you can go back as far as you want now, and even go back as far as October. I think if you listen there to Ali Morden and to Mark Foley, 2 members of last year's panel, I think they said in a nutshell that if they're to progress now and if they're to, you know, get the communication lines back functioning again like that, I think it's up to Justin McCarthy. And as Ali Moran said, if he came out and said no, there was no reference to indiscipline, and you know, if he picked up the phone and, you know, carte blanche, everybody come back and we'll start from scratch, there might be some hope, but I think the next season's probably gone.
Fair enough, but one of the women interviewed there in the Vox Pops in the street said, you know, what's wrong with Justin McCarthy? Why do they, if there's a problem, what's the problem?
Well, Wayne McNamara was interviewed there. He said he seemed to have a problem with the coaching, but I think the initial problem was there was 12 players dropped. You know, there was talk about cultures, this type of culture and that type of culture, but you know, it was handled badly from the beginning. And if you want to drop players, Michael, there's a way to drop them, and you drop them in dribs and drabs in January. You give them a chance. I mean, if it comes back to a manager, why weren't they dropped in the middle of the season last year if they weren't given the commitment and the proper commitment? And that would be the question I would have as a player.
On a wider point, Tony, I suppose people are concerned about what is perceived as player power. Players now deciding who's going to be the manager.
Yes, certainly, but that has to be, the issues are different in every scenario. In this scenario, I think it's all down to lack of communication initially, as Donald said. But in the end of the day, everyone that spoke there said that they wanted to solve the issue, they wanted the whole thing resolved. There's a willingness to resolve it from the players' point of view, and clearly everyone that spoke there gave the pathway to resolve it. Why? And there was a girl there, why can't they just sit down and talk about it?
Can you see it resolved?
Well, it's up to Justin McCarthy. I think that he makes the initial move, and I think the players will probably only bursting to get back if the right approaches are made.
All right, lads, thanks for that. Well, we've almost come to the end of Sunday Sport.